Yeah, you see that? America, right there. Exercise your right.
The voter right there.
Listen, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't vote, you can't complain. That's the facts. Now that I voted, I am legally allowed to complain about anything I want. I can bitch and moan about any local city council decision,
Exactly.
all the way up to why wasn't the Chinese spy balloon shot down earlier? I can complain about anything now. This is a get out of jail free card for internet trolling and doing whatever I want and getting mad at whatever local judge I want because I did this.
You did that. And hey, you can vote for Justin Fields as the next mayor. I think many would push for.
At this point, the options aren't great in Chicago.
Yeah.
Everyone,
which is a statement you can put on loop for the next probably 40 years. Add 40 years in the past as well.
I always say like there's no harder job than like being president of the United States. Like who would want that job? I think maybe being mayor of Chicago might be worse.
It might be. It very well might be. It's the PR alone associated with that job is brutal.
I can't help but think on days like today when it's when there is, we don't talk politics obviously on the show, but there's a former president getting arrested and indicted, and local elections here in the Illinois, Missouri area where I'm at. I can't help but today think about our dear friend Nate Byrne and these are the days where it's funny. Him and I used to talk about like he would be interested in my local mayor elections here in Quincy.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, he'd be like, well, no, like he's like, and he would know things about the local, like, oh, did you know that Quincy's the only town in Illinois that's like under a certain amount of population that you actually have to declare whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. Like where we grew up in Crystal Lake, you didn't have to declare, you just ran. But in like, and it's like the rule, like in any town under a certain population, like you don't declare. Quincy's like one of the only in the United States it's left, like you have to declare because it's like Quincy's like this old world city in this weird way. I call it like Reno, Nevada. It's the big little city of. It thinks it's way more important than it is, but I laugh about stuff like that, and I reminded of him in a good way today. So exercise your right to vote. Give yourself a reason to complain online.
Love the tribute there. So obviously we had last week off on the show.
Yeah.
And, nothing major obviously happening. This is, if there is a 2-week period of a little bit of slow, more dead space in the NFL, it is this time of the year. But really, as we've talked about many times on the show, it's a year-long deal with the NFL. And so there is stuff to talk about. And we're going to touch on a few of those topics here today as we get ready. The NFL draft only a few weeks away. But before we get into those, obviously we'll talk about Jalen Carter, some news coming out with him, the Lamar situation, latest from Aaron Rodgers, the Packers, the Jets, and some OBJ news as well. But before that, Mark, obviously the big sports news in the past week that we've missed here on the show was baseball opening day off and running. The Cubs are already in complete disaster mode.
Hey, Swansby's hitting though. Swansby's hitting.
So Swansby, I like that. He's doing great. The rest, David, I can go off on David Ross's awful management of the bullpen and the lineup in general. But I digress. We had opening day with MLB's off and running. MLB, not the MLB. I'm sorry for all of those I may have offended by saying that.
True.
And then we had 2 NCAA championship games. The women's game between LSU and Iowa, setting records. Iowa versus South Carolina a couple days before set records dating back. The most watched college basketball game on the ESPN airwaves dating back to 2008, North Carolina and Duke. So huge stuff for the women's game. I was loving the Final Four in the championship, and Caitlin Clark is a must-see TV. And then we saw UConn men win the championship here as well. I saw this on Twitter, Mark, and then I'll toss this to you for your quick thoughts. Someone said there, like, leave it up to college men's basketball, and I don't think they were talking of like this applies to the last 20 years, but more so recently. Like, leave it up to the March Madness for like the novelty to wear off the closer you get to a champion versus like any other sport. You know,
Yeah.
you ramp up to the World Series, you ramp up. And I know a lot of people still love the championship, but it did feel that way. Like the first couple rounds in the last few years have been way more compelling than the championship. It just feels kind of like an afterthought a lot of times. Even though, you know, we had a couple, you know, non-1 seeds get to the championship this time around.
Well, first off, I think the NFL, well, the reason why it's one of those, the NFL could own every week if it wanted to in America sports world. But I think the NFL is really smart to kind of taper off. And I'm glad there hasn't been giant news on the Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers front over the last 2 weeks. And one of the reasons why we decided to take last week off, we're like, listen, nothing has changed dramatically with either of those situations. And so let's let it breathe some more. And I think it's because the NFL, I think it's smart to just kind of let things settle because March Madness is such a special thing in American culture. And baseball opening day still is such a feel-good moment of the sports calendar where it feels like spring has sprung, the tides have turned. And so I like that the NFL kind of like cools off free agency,
Opens a door slightly.
It opens the door a little bit, and then it says, and it opens the door to things that aren't its competitor. You know, the NBA, it's so funny. The NBA is in like dire, you know, last, 5-10 games of the season. Now there's like 4 games left for most teams. And it's like crunch time for so many teams, and no one's talking about the NBA. I mean, it is March Madness, women's, men's, opening day baseball, Aaron Rodgers news, and then it's like, oh yeah, LeBron's back, KD's back, and the playoffs will get started soon. And so the NFL is always kind of like it's just like constantly ribbing the NBA like so hard, just like boxing out, use an NBA term, just boxing out the NBA.
Well, they took Christmas away from them now, you know.
I know, and now that the NBA and now that baseball is going to start heading into the long slog, and people tune out of baseball, and March Madness is done. The NBA, as it starts to ramp up at the playoffs start, the NFL's like, oh, we're back. The draft, here we go. Boom, we're gonna throw it on your lap. But I'll just say, to me, this like 2.5 week stretch is so great because I'm a major golf fan as well. Like, not in the sense that I'm a diehard golf fan. Let me listen to what I said. I'm a major golf fan. I love the 4 majors. They're so incredible, especially with the live golf thing now. But I will say, going back to your point of the whole March Madness dying, the excitement dying off, the greatest thing about the bracket, what it gives us is what we all love the most in sports fandom. It's the what if. What do we love most about the NBA? The offseason. We love the offseason. Like, oh my God, so-and-so's going to trade for this, or this super team's going to happen. This superstar's unhappy and they want to move. And we're loving now more and more in the NFL too, the offseason, the what if, where we just get to speculate and fan bases get to dream. And literally all March Madness is, for the first 3 weekends of it, is the dream of, if they beat them and they beat them, and who's going to go on the Cinderella run in this team. And then when it finally gets decided who's playing the championship, it's like, well, I didn't have it anyways. But you still watch it. Right. And really, I will say this about the women's tournament. The women's tournament to me was the first time it felt like you're just tuning in to watch, because it's must watch TV because the teams are great. The storylines are great. UConn being so dominant for so long, I think was good and bad, because obviously you knew the names: Diana Taurasi, Brianna Stewart, Gino Ariema, think of all the names that went through UConn, right? But they were so dominant, it felt like, oh, well, UConn, if they're in it, they're going to win it. And in the last 5-6 years, UConn's still really good, but now the women's game is just really becoming a landscape of teams can win it at any moment. And that, I think, has become really compelling for the women's game. ESPN Plus owning it and them scheduling their games really well is great too. Friday night, stand alone against some BS NBA games. You can watch, huge WNBA, NCAA women's games. They don't have to compete against the men. They're on their own networks. You can easily find them, and ESPN and ESPN Plus. So a lot of great stuff from that. And now the NFL said, okay, you got your window. We'll give you a kind of this week too at the Masters. And then by this time next week, it's all NFL and then NBA playoffs. And the sports calendar opens and then closes shut once again.
That's right. That's right. It does. Yeah. So, you soak it up while you can and enjoy it. Of course, we are, huge NFL fans, and that is the sport of choice. But it's a great time of year to really get to pick, your choice of what you want to go after. College athletics, NBA, baseball. We got the Masters here coming up. And of course, the NFL draft just a few weeks away as well. So it really is an awesome time of the year to either dig in for the final stretch in some of these sports, or get a springboard and jumping off point. It's a lot of different aspects to think about.
It's one of the reasons why the XFL and the USFL I don't think will ever be much bigger than what they currently are. They can survive. But we as sports fans just need those mental breaks where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, baseball. Oh, it's great to watch baseball again.
Mm-hmm.
And like, oh, it's NBA playoffs. Like, I care about the NBA playoffs. I want a little bit of like, all right, yeah, NFL offseason talk, but focus on the NBA playoffs. March Madness, like, it's a big, big thing. We want to be able to watch it, enjoy it. And so it is one of those weird things where the NFL is so big and so dominant. It will just always continue to kill my interest in any other football league, because it's like I'm already focusing so much on the NFL anyways. You do want those mental breaks. You could dive into the other stuff. And so we're in it now, and then it's about to close, and the rest of April is going to be very, very heavy NFL talk, not just obviously on our show, because it is an NFL show, but back on the majority of the sports radar as well.
And then you're 4, 5, 6 weeks away from training camp. So
that's like, crazy.
I mean, we're already, getting closer to the start of the 2023 season. It's wild. So let's go back to what we missed last week, which was the biggest news of the relatively little news that there was in the NFL. Lamar Jackson tweeting out his piece, finally, what we've been waiting for to hear from him for quite some time now. As we all know, he has his mom and, really himself as his agents, and he's the guy discussing with teams. There were some, supposed reports that there were uncredited people trying to lobby on his behalf to other teams. He has squashed that. He said that's not true. It's not, happening. But regardless, the biggest part of what he said in his tweet was that he revealed to the nation that he had requested a trade the first week of March from the Ravens. So this was the first definitive statement we've had from either side in regards to the future of that player. Of course, they put the transition tag on him, so it's going to require 2 first-round picks for any team to try and get him, and the Ravens will have an opportunity to match whatever that team is offering Lamar as well. So it's important context to take into this. Obviously, that's news that Lamar requested a trade. And also, which is something that everyone talked about, was that Lamar chose to drop said news mere minutes before John Harbaugh was to take the podium over at the coaches meetings, and where they were going to discuss everything with the media. So it was obviously placed at a specific time for a specific reason. Harbaugh just simply said they are hopeful that Lamar's their quarterback, and they're going to be planning for that to be the case. But I mean, does it seem like this is a fracture that won't heal? Or in your mind, is there still a real possibility that Lamar Jackson is a Raven this upcoming season and just sits out?
Well, I don't think he's if he can agree to a new contract with Baltimore, I think he'll stay. And I think if Baltimore matches whatever offer, he will stay. And I think Lamar at that point in time, depending on the size of the offer, I could see him absolutely just being like, I'm all in, I'm back. because he is such a baller, he's such a football player, and he loves the game and he loves to play. But to me, this was Lamar saying to other teams, when you make the qualifying offer, you don't necessarily have to do that. Like because it's a game of chess, right? They talk, they can't work anything out. The Ravens play their big trump card with the transition tag where it's like, hey, you can make the offers. All right, go try and find your money. Go find money. And his counter chess move to that is, you know what? Other NFL teams don't even worry about it. Just try to come get me, trade for me, and then let me negotiate with you once I get into camp with you and get away from Baltimore. And that's a kind of like, okay, a trump card to Baltimore, because now Baltimore, instead of just waiting for Lamar to get an offer and then just signing it, now Baltimore's getting calls and going, oh crap, now we have to start really working and judging what is our value in actually if we're going to trade him or not. I think the Baltimore still held so much of the power because Baltimore knows that Lamar is literally not going anywhere unless they decide. He is not a free agent or anything like that. And even if he gets an offer, they can match it. So I'm firmly in the camp that I think Lamar Jackson would still play for Baltimore, but I do think at this point in time, there's some real fractures. And I do think that's why you're hearing the OBJ rumors with Baltimore. I think Baltimore's trying to show Lamar, listen, this has gotten out of hand. We want you at a reasonable price. The price the rest of the NFL is reasonably putting around for your value as well. It's not our fault you don't have an agent. It's not our fault that you didn't, we didn't get a deal done earlier and now you could even double dip and now you're stuck in this weird scenario. You were managing your career in that way. You knew your contract as a rookie when we drafted you. Like if you had an agent, they could be constantly working for you to do all these other things. So it's that none of that's our fault. We're going to offer you what we value, and it seems like what the rest of the NFL values. To answer the question, I think the best way to say it is I could see Lamar still playing for Baltimore, but I firmly believe if anything's getting done with Lamar, it will be after the draft, because I don't think any of these teams want to give Baltimore their first round picks this year. They want to give Baltimore future picks because they know after they get Lamar, those picks are going to be worse picks. They want to devalue their own picks. So I firmly believe that after the draft, you will see how the quarterback landscape shakes out in Indy, New England, Atlanta, Washington. There's going to be teams then who say, all right, now we're willing to sign Lamar to an offer sheet. And if he accepts it and the Baltimore doesn't match, we're willing to give up the picks. Or now let's talk about what's a real trade value for Lamar. What does Baltimore want to just give him up without having to do the offer sheet? But Baltimore realistically, again, holds the power because Baltimore's going to say, well, we want at least 2 first-round picks because that's what we're going to get for him if you sign him anyways, if you offer him a contract. So it's a messy situation. I feel for Lamar. He's worth a lot. I would sign him to a lot. I think he's going to be worth more than he gets. But he has screwed this up royally by not having an agent. And we've said that for over a year now.
Yeah, no, he put himself in a tough position. But I do think the power scales are a little bit different depending on the situation. Because, for instance, as you mentioned, no team's going to want to give up the 2 first-round picks until after the draft so they can be future first-round picks. But in that regard, I mean, then Baltimore is going to say, well, screw this. We'll instead, match your offer. And then what if Lamar's not happy with the overall offer in the first place? It's a total kind of, messy situation all around. I mean, if you're Baltimore, though, I think if you're going to get 2 first-round picks, then you just move on at that point, because that's good compensation, and it's clear that Lamar doesn't feel a certain way. Now, with that being said, Monken's there now to run his air raid offense. I think if Lamar was, you know, willing to give this another look, I think it'd be smart for him to move forward and hope that this team is willing to kind of put the pieces around him to succeed. And he very likely could do that in this new kind of offense. And that would suggest to me, too, that they're planning to kind of provide some weaponry on the outside for that. But I'll also say this, if a deal doesn't get done, this puts Baltimore in a strange spot too, because I think that their draft plans drastically change based on whether or not they have Lamar Jackson there next year. Because
Yeah.
if Lamar is the guy next year, your draft plan should be, okay, we now need to take a wide receiver with our first pick. Or at the very, like late day 2, like it has to be within the first couple rounds, like no question that you need to take a wide receiver then, or make some sort of big play. So, but if he's not, then okay, well now we have either Tyler Huntley or a quarterback that we're going to go try and get somehow. And then are we going to trade up and try and take one, or are we going to, do this journeyman thing for a year until we figure it out? So there's a lot of moving pieces there. I mean, you're talking about a franchise having an young MVP caliber quarterback or a backup and starting completely from scratch. It's two very different scenarios that Baltimore is wading into right now.
No, it's you're absolutely right. I think my final kind of a bow on this for me is just, if you're a Baltimore, you have to say to yourself, okay, say he gets an offer from Washington post-draft and it's, 3 years, $145 million, all guaranteed. They're willing to sign that deal. Plus they're going to, give up the 2 first-round picks, right, to get it done. And if Baltimore matches, right, and to keep Lamar at 3 years, $145 million, I'm just making stuff up here that seems, maybe in the realm of possible, realm of reality. And then you pose like, well, what if Lamar doesn't want to play? Well, then you say to yourself, okay, we still have the asset to trade him, right? Like we still can just say, if you're going to hold out and we match this deal, because he's gonna have to sign the offer sheet. He's got to agree to the offer sheet from Washington, sign on the dotted line, and then it gets matched. So he's then contractually locked into that number. And if he doesn't want to play for Baltimore, he's like, all right, I'm going to hold out. Well, then Baltimore can just go around, all right, league, who wants a former MVP in his prime, young, healthy, 26 years old on a 3-year, $145 million guaranteed deal? Send us your trade offers. And they'll still get a ton of just compensation at that point in time. And I think, honestly, then the market might even be better for Lamar, depending on where the draft goes. And like, there's going to be, Washington would be involved, in this example, or other teams would be involved. They would get some real good just compensation back. And I think Baltimore's confident in saying, listen, we'll go into a year with a really solid team and a Tyler Huntley-led team. And if we stink, we're confident in Harbaugh. We're confident the direction this organization's going. We're now going to have a ton of capital to either move up in the draft next year to go get a Caleb Williams or a Drake May or a star next year, or there's some veterans on the market, or and people that they could certainly sign and be willing to start the year with and make a run with. It'll be interesting to see. But Baltimore is a well-run organization. I feel bad for the Ravens fans because, as a fan, I put myself in their shoes, and I'd just be so bummed about all of this because it's not your fault that you're about to maybe lose your franchise player, and your team will not be as good without him, no matter really what happens, because there are very few Lamar Jacksons out there.
Best quarterback in their history, too.
Yeah, and you feel bad for him because it's a bummer. And a lot of it's his own fault. Again, if he had an agent, I just do not think we'd be at this point at all. I think he would have had a deal done early. Like you saw, Josh Allen's deal got done early. Patrick Mahomes' deal got done early. They would have capitalized off that MVP season. They would have got him a really great deal. And his agent would have been able to convince him, we're going to double dip here, Lamar. We're getting a really great deal now. It's top of the market now, and you'll be 26, 27, 28 when this deal ends, and you can sign another giant deal. And now Lamar's going to be lucky if he gets one big deal in his career, because by the time this deal's done, he's going to be almost 30. And then it's like, well, who knows how his body holds up. And I just don't think guys are like Lamar thought that through in the right way. And I know it's your family and you're trying to protect yourself, but I think it's a great, great warning for every rookie out there, guy who's entering the draft. Look at this and take this as agents. If you find the right agent, they are not stealing from you. You are paying them to work on your behalf, and in the end, make you more money than you could possibly get without it. It's like selling a home without a realtor. You know what I mean? For sale by owner. Sure. You may get a deal, but in the end, you may in the long run look at it and realize you lost out on a lot of money or opportunities or other offers or the right home just because you were trying to save on that bottom line right away.
Things. Yeah, you could overlook things and not, there are aspects of contracts that you just as a player don't know about. Like you don't know all of the inner workings that an agent whose job it is to deal with these contracts on a daily basis does.
And let's be honest, teams who work with players who don't have agents, because it's happened before. I mean, the Ravens worked with Roquan Smith. He doesn't have an agent. They just got to deal with them with him. These teams know what they're doing. And let's be honest, they're sharks in their own way. You know what I mean? Like,
sure,
I think they smelled blood in the water with Lamar. They smelled blood. I think the Ravens knew, like, after his MVP season, when he didn't come, he doesn't have an agent pounding on the door going, all right, let's get a deal done. Like they were just like, okay, he's gonna we're gonna ride this thing out, and we're only paying him a little bit of money because we drafted him at the end of the first round. They're not in a hurry to do it, because organizations know, as you're seeing now, like you just don't look at the Eagles. Like, I mean, they went from drafting Wentz, they got as much as they could out of Wentz, they drafted another quarterback, and now they were right back in the Super Bowl. Like, if you're well run in a lot of ways in the modern NFL,
you can recover.
You can recover, and you can draft that next guy. And if you find the right guy in the right system, you're ready to go and you're ready to still compete. It may not be the best plan for, long-term success, but there are examples of it working. And I think the Ravens could be one of those examples. You take a slight down year, maybe when Lamar's gone. I think the Ravens could be right back in a great spot in a year or two if they play this thing right. It's not up to them to look out for Lamar's best interests. That's what Lamar's agent would do if he had one.
It sucks because I think, he means well, and both sides I respect a ton. So it'd be way easier if he was just, a very unlikable figure. But, he's a good dude by all accounts, and, it's just an all around unfortunate circumstance. So yeah, it's something we'll certainly be keeping close eyes on as we get closer to the draft and see what happens going into next season.
Final prediction on Lamar. I'll give mine. I'll let you. Then I'll turn it over to you. My prediction is he's not playing for Baltimore next year. I really believe post draft you're going to see something happen. A team make the offer, get him into camp right away. You know what I mean? Get him on a new deal, and Baltimore will take those 2 first-round picks and walk away from not having to pay him $150+ million guaranteed. And I don't know which team it will be. My short run of list will, I feel, Atlanta, Washington, to me are kind of the front runners. Indianapolis is like that third, would be in that third level for it. I firmly believe he's not with Baltimore next year.
We do differ on that. I think he is back in Baltimore next year after all of this.
All right.
I think we somehow get to a point where he's in Baltimore, probably ultimately just playing on the tag, showing up, having a great year, and saying, are you guys really going to, try and run this again on me? Or are you going to are we going to, either do a deal or let me go? I think that could happen. I mean, let's not forget, injuries aside, which I understand they're a part of this thing, of course. I wouldn't say he's terribly injury prone. It's not like, I mean, yes, he's missed some games very recently, but he also went a very long stretch without missing any games.
Very true.
All of that aside, the money that we've seen Kirk Cousins make off of playing on 2 franchise tags and still getting, He got 2 massively guaranteed years out of that, plus all of his rookie contract, and then another big deal, and then a deal after that as well. Lamar could go that route should he choose. He already has an MVP under his belt. Quarterbacks are maybe a little bit easier to come by than during the Kirk Cousins years. I mean, there were still way more misses than there were hits. Seems like quarterback is having a renaissance of sorts at the position, but I mean, he could certainly play on 2 franchise tags and still come out of it as a 28-year-old, coming off of potentially another MVP year. Who knows? And so all of that could factor into this too. But yeah, I ultimately think he will be back in Baltimore despite everything that's happened over the last year, really. But that's just my guess.
My only disagreement with that is he clearly in his last statement also said like the reason he didn't play at the end of the year was because he wasn't willing to risk further injury without the contract. So I can't imagine he's playing on a tag, no matter what the tag is. Lamar Jackson I do not think will play a snap of football until he has a new multi-year deal with big guarantee money.
It's just tough, man. I mean, holding out is it doesn't often work out. Young. I mean, ask Le'Veon Bell.
So young. He's so young. He's got the time. He could miss a year, and I think he could come back from it.
That's true, but you also worry about. I mean, Deshaun missed a year, granted for completely different reasons and circumstances, but it's not easy to just get back into the swing of things. It really takes 2 years.
Teams will be, but there's always desperate teams. We think,
I mean, that's a bad example because Deshaun still got $250 million.
We think there's the landscape we settled. There's always desperate teams for a quarterback, especially
going from a reputable organization to the New York Jets, who haven't won in decades and decades and decades. They're still in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes, but we seem to be at a standstill right now with where Green Bay and New York are at in this thing. Obviously, Green Bay wants, multiple high picks, including at least a first. If not, I believe they're asking for 2 firsts. Peter Schrager offered a very interesting one on Good Morning Football just this morning, actually, which was because he doesn't think that Green Bay is going to get 2 firsts for Aaron Rodgers. It's just not going to happen. So he was suggesting the Jets send this year's 2nd, this year's 4th, and a conditional 2nd in 2025. And that 2nd becomes a 1st if Aaron Rodgers plays 8+ games for the next 2 seasons. And I could see that actually being a good deal for both the Packers and the Jets. I just don't think the Packers will ultimately accept a deal like that. But the Jets, that gives the Jets security that Aaron Rodgers isn't like they're saying, look, if he flakes out on us after a year, then you get our 2nd. But if he doesn't flake out on us and we get him for the 2 years that we want him for, then we'll gladly give you a 1st. And, we'll move on, including a 2nd and a 4th. I just don't know if Green Bay's willing to take that kind of compensation. But Green Bay also doesn't have a whole lot of suitors, so I don't know what they're going to do in this situation.
So to me, what's interesting about Schrager's, I'm glad you brought up Schrager's suggestion this morning because I saw that as well. And Peter Schrager is just tuned into the NFL and things like this. He's terrific. I got to meet him in Phoenix really quickly.
He's a pretty tall guy, right?
You wouldn't think it. He's easily 6'3". I'm 6'5". He's easily 6'3". He's surprisingly tall, big dude. But his proposed trade is based off of the fact that there are rumors that the Packers are willing to move off not needing a first rounder.
Right.
They're willing to move off and not needing the Jets' 13th pick. And I do think if you're on the opposite of the Lamar deal, that I think it'll be done after the draft. This will get done before the draft. I firmly believe it. I think that the part of this is the Packers wanting to make Aaron look a little bad. That Aaron Rodgers is only worth 2nd rounders. Wow, you know what I mean? I think this is a little bit of the Packers doing some dirt to Aaron. They don't want to give as much of an edge as possible. The Packers, you got to remember, Packers are a proud organization from a tiny town that they live, breathe, and die the Packers. The worst case, the best thing, think back to when the Packers traded Brett Favre to the Jets. Remember how much that season was a weird season. The beginning of that season, Brett Favre came out on fire. The Jets were like 7-1. Everything looked great, and it fell apart. And that was like Packers, like they were so happy because even though they didn't make the playoffs, they had a rough year, Aaron's first year. The story wasn't the Packers. The story was, oh, Brett in New York looks washed and it's bad. Like they want that so bad. They want that so badly. And so they don't want him to get to New York as quickly as possible. They want to make New York sweat this thing out, and they do want to put the pressure on New York as well as they get closer to draft day. They have to really start thinking about, crap, we do not want to trade up. We do not want to be stuck with Hendon Hooker in the first round. We don't want to end up with trading up for Anthony Richardson and him and Zach Wilson. Like we need to get this figured out. And I do think it is important for the Jets to have the conditional of like, listen, Aaron Rodgers has 2 years on this deal. We are willing to take on this deal, pay him for the 2 years with you and take on the Aaron Rodgers experiment for 2 years. But we need to know if it's only 1 year, then we haven't totally sunk our franchise. And so I love this deal. I think it's a deal that both teams can get behind. I think if you're a fan of the Packers at this point in time, you look at it, you go, man, you know what? I really wish we had just traded him 2 years ago when you could have gotten 3-4 first round picks and, you know what I mean, coming off an MVP but you decided to go for it one more year and it led to no MVP, no playoffs. And this is what you get because of that gamble you took. And that gamble killed a ton of leverage. Aaron himself, be mad at Aaron, his retirement, non-retirement, weird ayahuasca darkness retreats killed a ton of his value as well. 2 years ago, the Aaron Rodgers market, even a year ago, the Aaron Rodgers market would have been very big, very juicy, multiple first-round picks. The current Aaron Rodgers market, with the deal, with how bad he played last year and how it ended badly in the end, and with how weird his off seasons have been, this is the current Aaron Rodgers market. One team, and they're willing to give you decent compensation, but it comes with, contingency plans. So I think it's a great deal. I think it works for both teams. If I was them, I would do it. But if I were the Packers, I would wait as long as possible, and I'd make the Jets sweat it out. I'd make Aaron sweat it out. I'd make him look as bad as possible and hope that you have a Brett Favre 2.0 situation. So, because I don't think it's going to be a successful on-the-field season for Green Bay next year. So Green Bay's wins will be Jets' losses next year.
If Green Bay gets, let's say they take this deal from the Jets, the one that's been proposed, and they get a second rounder this year. So they'll have 2 second rounders. Is there a possibility that the Green Bay Packers are in the quarterback play? I mean, I could certainly see them packaging their picks and moving up and trying to trade with Arizona or trying to get a quarterback. I mean, it doesn't seem like they have much faith in Jordan Love, and maybe they see something in him that, hasn't been kind of shown to the rest of the country. But where it stands, it doesn't seem like they're totally on board with him for the future. I could easily see them, if they have now another asset for this year's draft, to package that together and move up into the first round and try and make a move. I mean, it's certainly, possible. Then we're talking about a Green Bay team that just has Jordan Love the next couple of years, and they're all of a sudden the top team that needs a quarterback,
that's fascinating. I never thought of that. And the reason I think it's fun to think about, but I don't think it's going to happen is because Green Bay just doesn't operate like that. And Green Bay, I think
that's very true. Yeah.
I think Green Bay needs to show it to themselves. They need to show it to the fan base that, like, we've got to give Jordan Love a season. And the nice thing about where they're at with Jordan Love is at the end of the season, you either pick up the 5th-year option or you don't. And so if he has a really nice season and leads you to unexpected and there's like some real pop there, then you have him cost controlled next year as well when you're still eating some of Aaron's contract. And then you get another year of like, okay, now it's the do or die year for Jordan Love. Make the playoffs, get us to And if he stinks or he doesn't do that, then you move off of him with no financial burden and you can reset your franchise, right? And you'll have picks, you'll have, your full arsenal. And being the Green Bay Packers quarterback, I think even in 2 years from now will still be a very big deal in the NFL circles, the NFL world. And I also think if the Packers don't, if Jordan Love is bad this year and it takes a spin, if you're bad in the NFC with a bad quarterback, you're gonna be in that top 10. You know what I mean? You're gonna be picking that top 10. And they'll have so many assets to move up to get the guy they want maybe next year. So it'll be interesting. I can't see them moving up this year because you're not going to get one of the top 2 guys. And if you're not going to get one of the top 2 guys, it's a weird look for a franchise because you're like, well, wait a minute. Jordan Love was the 4th guy in his draft and he didn't pan out. Do I really want the 3rd and the 4th guy in this draft, a non-really strong quarterback draft? Will that pan out?
Aaron was what, the 5th?
No, he was only the 2nd quarterback in his draft.
It was just Alex Smith?
It was just Alex Smith and then Aaron.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
So it's a that's a different world back then, man. You got to remember that was
you think about the 04 class that was stacked, especially at the top with Ben, Eli, and Phillip. And then to go to the next year and it was pretty light.
Just 2. So I think final prediction on the Aaron Rodgers thing. Mine would be he will be a Jet. I think the deal will look very similar to what Schrager's deal is talking about. I think it'll happen close to the draft. My guess is I don't think it happens in the next week or 2. I think it'll happen the week before or the week of the draft. That's my guess.
Yeah. No, I think we're in line on that. I think it'll happen definitely before the draft, but they're going to let this breathe a little bit for sure until something is solidified. So, yeah, another, Aaron Rodgers carousel that we're all just riding on for now.
Yeah.
Finally, couple, notes, nothing big, but Odell Beckham Jr. has had rumors floated out as to where he'll be next year. The 2 top contenders seem to be the Baltimore Ravens and the New York Jets, the 2 teams that we've discussed here with their quarterbacks. Obviously, he played very well in the Super Bowl, was probably on his way to being the Super Bowl MVP before getting hurt. Didn't play last season, so I'm just curious if this even moves the needle at all. To me, it seems like kind of a blah move. I mean, it's just he's not a guy that does it for me anymore. Is like, oh, we got OBJ. It just doesn't. It didn't even feel that way really when the Rams got him, to be quite honest with you.
So it's interesting that the Ravens and the Jets are the 2 kind of rumored teams that have offered, because they are the 2 teams that if I'm OBJ, you need to go somewhere with no, let me take that back. If I am a team offering OBJ a contract, I'm only offering OBJ a contract if I have a quarterback who can overrule OBJ. Aaron Rodgers and Lamar Jackson, it makes sense. They overrule OBJ, right? I do not offer OBJ a contract if I'm like New Orleans and it's like now Derek Carr's got to deal with OBJ. Or now Baker Mayfield, right, had to deal with OBJ. If I'm OBJ, though, I don't know what I've done with my money. I don't know what OBJ's financial situation's like. He lives very lavishly. He never got the mega deal, but he has, of course, the endorsements out the wazoo. So I don't know what his financials are like. But the fact that he was looking for $20 million per year makes me believe that the money and the is really important to him. And now that he's down, apparently he lowered it to like $15 million a year. And from what I read from just, again, non-confirmed sources, is that the Ravens were talking close to $10 million. The Jets are close to talk to $10 million. If I'm OBJ, I would much rather do what Juju Smith-Schuster just did. Go play a year on a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Kansas City Chiefs. Or go back to LA for something like that and just put up sick numbers like you did when you got to LA, prove that you're healthy, and then maybe you next year can get that 2-year, $20 million guarantee to be part of a run with a team. You know what I mean? I think because
I just don't know if he can get that kind of money.
But my thing is this: he was gonna get that money, and then he got injured. Like he proved it with the Rams. He really helped the Rams win that Super Bowl. You forget that run with the Rams he made. He was terrific for the Rams when he got there, and he was a team player. He was catching touchdowns. He was OBJ light. I mean, he was, still flashy, but it was way less than the Brown saga and the New York drama. And so if OBJ could just go and work with a really great quarterback, a Patrick Mahomes, go back with Matt Stafford for a year, put up big numbers, 10 touchdowns, close to 1,000 yards, 70-something receptions, absolutely, I think OBJ could find himself a year or two of bigger guaranteed money then on a short-term deal. I think it's out there. But if it's just the money right now, and maybe he's looking at his financials with his team going, we need money right now, then yeah, I'd be willing to risk it and go play for a New York or Baltimore and just say, cash in that last $10-15 million you can from the NFL, hopefully invest it well, and that's probably going to be the tail end of your career. But who knows? It's interesting. I would not be willing to sign OBJ if I didn't have a Hall of Fame quarterback or a quarterback on a Hall of Fame trajectory. Simple as that.
Yeah, I'm interested to see who else, enters the OBJ sweepstakes, because right now, with those two teams intact, I would think a lot of it's predicated on who's going to suit up under center for them next year, for sure. I don't know how I let this skip by, because this is actually bigger news and bigger deal than the OBJ stuff. But the some reportings out there, mainly from Mike Florio, that the Patriots have shopped quarterback Mac Jones to multiple teams in this offseason so far. What do we make of this, considering obviously it was a tumultuous year with the quarterback and Bill Belichick and company? We know what happened with the offensive coordinator shenanigans, having Matt Patricia, a defensive guy, be the OC. The offense was terrible. It was, as pedestrian as it gets. Mac Jones was frustrated, voiced it multiple times. Where do we see this playing out? Because if you're New England, I just don't. What is their plan? I mean, Bill Belichick is not going to be coaching. Maybe he is going to be coaching for another decade. I don't see it. So if you're Bill, I mean, you have to have a huge, ace up your sleeve then, because Mac Jones is a certainly capable quarterback, but you do need an elevated person at that position to compete in the AFC East. So just curious what your thoughts are on them shopping him, and even if they're, are money suitors.
I think there would be some suitors. It depends on what they were asking for and what they were looking to get back in return from Mac. I also think,
let me say real quick, the four teams mentioned: Commanders, Bucks, Texans, and Raiders.
Yeah. So, my big thing is if I'm one of those, if I'm looking to get Mac Jones again, I feel like if I'm one of those teams, I just want to wait to see how the draft pans out. I think the Patriots would be really in on Lamar Jackson. I think there's smoke, there's fire. The owner Robert Kraft said, "Oh, Meek Mill was texting me. You go get Lamar, whatever." I think there's some legitimacy to that. I think they were smart. Fit. I think they were smart to publicize it, because I think they need to let their organization, their fans know, hey, we're not resting on the laurels. Bill is only coaching because Bill wants to pass Don Shula for all-time wins. But in order to do that, he needs to average about like 10 wins a year for the next 3 years, or else he's got to coach 4 or 5 years at 7-8 wins. And that's a lot. I don't know if he can do that. So I think he wants to stack wins, and I think he knows Lamar would help him, but I think he knows the Ravens and hate his guts, and they don't want him to go to Baltimore.
Right.
So, but the problem is the Patriots would probably have to way overpay. The Patriots would probably have to come in with close to $200 million guaranteed for the Ravens to be like, screw this, we're not paying it. We'll let you drown with this, and we'll figure something else out. And I just don't know if the Patriots yet are in that. Should we do it? Should we not? But who knows? The Patriots operate sneakily. I would, if I was a team, honestly call the Patriots about Mac Jones post-draft, depending on where the lines fell. If you need a guy for a year or two cost control that you think could be effective in your system, Mac Jones could lead a team to the playoffs. He is Kirk Cousins. You know what I mean? He's that realm. So I think he's capable of doing it. But I think it's that kind of spot. Hey, we're in a weird transition for our organization, and we don't want to bottom out. But I don't know. It's interesting. The problem is I think the Patriots and Lamar, it would be amazing. I just don't think the Ravens would let it happen unless the Patriots way overpay. And I don't know if the Patriots financially are in a spot to do that right now.
Yeah, I don't think so. It would be a great fit with the run heavy system there, and I think Atlanta, as you previously mentioned, would be a great fit for Lamar as well. But yeah, in terms of the Mac Jones deal, I mean, there's a few teams certainly that could use him right now. Other than that, he is just a placeholder, likely until they draft their heir apparent. So Mac Jones. Certainly not in a great spot right now with New England, regardless.
Yeah.
Next, if he suits up for them next year, we'll just have to see how the, new offensive system is implemented and if it puts them in the right direction. But as it stands right now, they are not in a good place at all to compete in that stacked division now. Finally, before we sign off here, Mark, some news out of Jalen Carter, the Georgia defensive tackle, who has plummeted down a lot of draft boards, mainly because of his off the field issues, including, whatever his role may have been